Hello?
Jenna, I have some bad news. My father, your grandfather, William Moore, has, passed away.
Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, Jenna. None of us are near his house, and we need you to go and make sure the house is okay. There should be a key on the front steps.
Okay, I'm on my way now. Locked. I wonder what this opens.
My dear friend William, it has been too long since last I wrote, and it appears my wish to see you again may come true sooner than expected. I just wish it was under better circumstances. It won't surprise you that there are members of the guild who aren't happy with your decision. A meeting's been called for July. I'm afraid that your attendance is being insisted. Your true friend, John Wesson.
Dear William, I know this day is always hard for you, and I hope you know that I'm thinking of you. I can't believe it's already been 25 years. I have often thought of that long evening the three of us spent in the park, watching the stars. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I still remember her laugh as though it was just yesterday. Life can be so unfair. It's a cruel fate that put an end to nights like those, and an even crueler one that left you to raise those children alone. I'm glad you married again. You deserve to be happy. This is why I beg you to reconsider. I can't lose another friend, and the guild needs you now more than ever. I hope to talk soon. Signed, Willow Green.
A painting of Grandma, or another woman. Grandpa never talked about her, or anyone else. Come to think of it, my parents never did either. I never did beat Grandpa at chess. He bet me that I couldn't beat him until I was 18. I could never do it. It was like he was several moves ahead at all times.
Here. Locked. Something is inside. Locked. Locked.
These are probably all collector's items. Looks like Grandpa, but the style is too old. This house is old, but I don't know how old. I think it was retrofitted with electricity after it was built. This house is older than the rest of the neighborhood. Why was everything torn down?
Locked. 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 This is locked. How does one take a castle? I guess one can take a castle.
Grandpa never smoked. He must have had a visitor.
Something is inside. Aha, I got it. Locked. This is locked. What does this do? Another set of numbers. Another set of numbers. What could this mean? This key must open a door. This is locked. Locked. This is locked. Locked.
I never noticed this painting before. His clothes seem to be from a different era.
Dear William, I will never not be grateful for all that you've done for me. You are the best friend that anybody could ever ask for. I owe you my life after you helped me escape France in 1917. The dedication you've shown me and the Guild is immeasurable. With all that being said, it's difficult for me to understand why you're doing this. Please, write to me soon. We've always stood by each other. I know what the Guild is saying can't be true, so please just tell me what's going on. Signed, your good and best friend, John Wesson.
The light bulb is missing.
Looks like Grandpa. Is this our great-grandpa? Picture is too old to be Grandpa. Grandpa always did like the classics.
I wonder what no press, up, press means. This sounds like there's something in here.
That's a lot of old newspapers. They might be worth a lot of money. This is from the war, I guess. Which war, though?
Dear William, I must confess something that I wish I told you years ago, but just never knew how. After Margaret left, I tracked her down. I know you asked me not to, but I just had to know why. She moved to Florida in the 80s, married an older man who had a couple of kids from an old relationship. She died in 1993 from lung cancer. You always said smoking would be the death of her. I'm not sure I should have told you this, and through a letter isn't the best way to hear this news. But with how long it's been since we last saw each other in person, and with all the uncertainty at the moment, I thought it better to tell you sooner than later. I hope the closure brings you some comfort. Lots of love, Willow Green.
Is this a painting of the Crimean War?
This sounds like there's something in here. I wonder what no press, up, press means. What is this? A letter?
Dear William, I can't believe civilization works with all this chaos. I'll never forget when you said that. We were on a jitney in Chicago. We almost died at every junction with cars and people going in every direction and no order at all. It's a miracle that more people didn't. I think about that time when you had the idea of traffic lights. Who would have thought that less than 100 years later, almost every city across the town in the world would be using them? I know you weren't a fan of selling that patent, but the rules are the rules. You might not be credited in the history books, but you and I know that you saved a great many lives. You should make sure not to forget that. We've both seen chaotic times, but you always had a way of separating the trees from the forest. A way of noticing the pattern and disorder. I can only think of one time when you allowed the chaos in, and that was in 1952. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Huh. I'm glad that's behind us now. Please, write back to me soon. Your loyal friend, John Wesson.
I wonder what this opens. A light bulb. I wonder where it goes. Another key. It says kitchen on it. It looks like this is locked. Locked.
Looks like the house was modernized. Still feels really old, though.
Locked.
Dear William, I always wondered why you didn't want your second set of children to have access to the Ankh. It puzzled me that you could even think about keeping that from them. I must admit, there were times when I even thought it was cruel of you, but I now realize you were right. The power bestowed upon us is a dangerous one. I'm glad we've resisted its draw so far. Your children would not have been so strong. I see that now. I guess you always did. There is something wrong with the guild, and I thank you for helping me to notice it. The power of the Ankh has corrupted it. Without proper support from each other, I worry we'll do something even more selfish and perilous for the rest of society than the last crash. Do you remember the size of the queues for food and work? How can the actions of such a small few impact the lives of so many? We must take action to protect the world against the guild, against us. I wonder now, is membership a blessing or a curse? Signed, Willow Green.
Something is inside.
When you were finished talking to the guild in 1952, I thought they would throw you out, or at the very least, take your ank away. I've never seen you more upset. What the twins did was well outside of what the guild normally accepts, and they knew it. Just because they found a loophole on a technicality doesn't mean the guild shouldn't have taken action. After that, we all knew the rift in the guild's leadership started to diverge. The rift was forming for decades, and your tribunal seemed to solidify it. Now look at what it's become. Signed, John Wesson.
The light bulb is missing. Something is inside. Something is inside. Something is inside. Another key on the table. This must be the key to the bathroom. I think these statues open the box. Looks like there are a lot of statues. I better find them all. Look, the box is unlocked. I bet this opens up the closet door. Something is inside.
You have a great-grandchild. Her name's Ellie, and she's healthy and beautiful. I know the past is difficult to leave behind, but Julie wants you to meet her. The whole family wants to see you. You owe them that at least. You won't always have this chance to make amends. I wish more than anything that I rebuilt the bridges I burnt with my family while I had the chance, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Don't make the same mistake. They want to see you. Signed, Willow Green.
Something is inside. Something is inside. Looks like something is missing. Something is inside. Another key. I wonder what this opens. I bet this goes to one of the bedrooms upstairs. I wonder what this could be. Another key. I wonder what this opens. Locked. Locked.
All classics. A picture of Dad when he was young. This was his room. Grandpa and Dad. Looks like they had fun.
Do you really think Jenna has what it takes to fix the guild? She's an amazing young woman, but she's practically still a child. What makes you think she'll be able to do what we've both failed? You're potentially putting her in a lot of danger. It's a huge responsibility for anybody to undertake. I beg you to think about this carefully, and please talk to me. Signed, Willow Green.
The light bulb is missing. I bet this opens the other bedroom.
Dear William, I had a meeting with a few of the Crows. They threatened to take the insurance business away from us. They said that it was too good for its own good. I just wanted to provide a service and make some money to live. A few days later, I was contacted by some other guild members. They said to not worry about the men who showed up. Their shakedown rattled me. That's why I wanted to sell the insurance business so bad. Signed, John Wesson.
My aunt always did like horses.
this opens the master bedroom.
Is that H.G. Wells? This painting looks to be done around 1885. Who is it? Wait, when was my grandpa born? When were his parents born?
This looks interesting, but it needs a record on it. Looks like something is missing.
Grandpa always made his bed no matter what.
Remember when the world seemed to be in a constant state of war? And starting afresh was as simple as enlisting and then going missing in action. Well, times are changing. People nowadays don't really appreciate how peaceful these times are. I worry a time will come when keeping our secrets is no longer possible. What do we do then, when the world starts to learn of the Ankh? Signed, John Wesson.
Looks like something is missing. This looks interesting, but it needs a record on it. Something is inside.
Did I ever tell you I saw Mary in New York after we left Europe? Heh, must have been 20 years since I'd last seen her. She looked so different, so much older and more frail. She saw me. She even said my name. I pretended not to hear her and walked past. I felt awful, but how do you even begin to explain? She looked sad as I turned around the corner. I always do wonder what would have happened if I'd been honest to her all these years ago, and I just told her about all the Ankhs and the Guild. Signed, John Wesson.
This is a very old map in mint condition. It must be worth a fortune.
Something is inside.
Grandpa always made his bed no matter what.
This looks like the key to the attic. It seems I have to reassemble the machine. this key goes for basement.
Dear William, it's strange to notice myself thinking things that aren't me. The lust for power the Ankh imbues in all of us is growing within me, but I'm still me enough to notice it. You have always been a calming force. I hope we can speak soon. I fear if we leave it too long, the influence of this damn Ankh will corrupt my every thought. Lots of love. Willow Green.
This looks like it goes to the device outside. I bet this goes in the gramophone upstairs. What does it say?
Dear Jenna, if you're reading this, then I'm already dead. I'm sorry I never said goodbye to you, but I knew you would try to convince me I was making the wrong decision. What you're going to read here will sound too strange to be true, but I swear to you, every word is entirely accurate. I've gone by many names in my time, but the name that is truly mine is William Moore. I was born in 1835 in Newcastle. It was an exciting time for the city. Buildings were being knocked down to make room for great grey stone structures. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and the city and its production grew every year. I saw Queen Victoria when I was 14. She visited Newcastle to open the new railway station, and everyone came to see her. I never felt the hunger pangs of poverty, but we were by no means wealthy. My father was a dock worker at the port of Tyne. The North was built on workers like him. In 1854, my life took a drastic change. A fire broke out across the city, burning down many of our friends' and family's homes, and Britain was at war with Crimea. It was the first time war had ever been shown the way it truly was. Newspapers printed stories, and even early photographs made their way to the UK. I felt the need to join, so after the fire, I offered my space in my house to my younger cousin and joined the army. It was here, I believe, the strange story of my life truly began. One day, I was on patrol and stumbled down a pit, and at the bottom I discovered a wounded Russian soldier. He had been shot in his abdomen and had already lost a lot of blood. Standard protocol meant I should have killed him as soon as I saw him, but he was no threat, and he was going to die anyway. Instead of killing him, I offered him my flask and helped him drink from it. He asked my name and told me he had a nephew also called William. I don't recall his name now, though. From his pocket, he pulled out a golden amulet. It was like a cross, but the top was curved over, and it was adorned with strange hieroglyphics that glimmered in the light. He called it his ankh and pressed it firmly into my hand. He told me a story not entirely unlike the story I am now telling you. How he had lived for hundreds of years, and that the ankh grants almost everlasting life. Of course, the rational part of me took it as the ramblings of a dying madman. But the second the Yank touched my skin, I felt indescribably different, and I knew what he was saying was true. I asked about his injury and why the Yank didn't prevent that. He explained that the power of the Yank was limited. It could only slow down aging, not prevent death altogether. He also told me I must keep it on me, or at least near me, at all times for it to work. He had a backpack with more gold in it than I could even imagine. He told me it was mine to keep, but that I had to meet the guild first, and that if I didn't, they would find me. He said I had no choice, so reluctantly, I agreed. His final words were words of warning. The guild is more powerful than you could possibly imagine, he said. If you cross them, they will kill you. As he died, I closed his eyes and wrapped a coat I found in his bag over his body. I walked south toward the coastline as he instructed. The boat was exactly where he said it would be. Rowing was difficult with the gold weighing the boat down, and the fog made it hard to see the island he described. But eventually, I found it, and I found the square stone he said would be on the island's west coast. The stone was even larger than he described, a monolith facing out toward the sea. The same hieroglyphic patterns that were on the strange relic in my hand also covered the stone. As he instructed, I then lit a fire in front of it. I waited about 6 hours before I saw the flicker of an oil lantern approaching from the sea. A small vessel eventually revealed itself through the fog. 3 men came ashore, each with rifles drawn and aimed at me. I threw my arms up in surrender, but they didn't lower their guns. I repeated the passphrase the dying man told me, "Pisces, Pisces," over and over again. Only then did they lower their weapons. They asked who I was, and I explained how I'd come to be here and what had happened to the man. They shared a look with each other before telling me to board the boat. That was the last thing any of them said to me for a journey that lasted days. We arrived on another island. I never did learn where. I was ushered through castle ruins into a room with the most marvelous decor. The room hosted the most impressive display of historical artifacts, even to this day, I've ever seen. There were Roman and Greek sculptures that would be the prized possession of any museum nowadays. Their condition kept immaculate and preserved through the ages. The walls were covered with paintings from many different cultures and art styles. A grand table laden with golden chalices and glistening silverware stretched the length of the room. Around the table were 10 seats. One of the men I sailed with gestured toward one of them, then left. I waited half an hour before the door again opened. 9 robed men entered the room, each taking one of the remaining seats at the table. Servers entered and poured each one, as well as me, a drink, and shortly after food was brought in. Then attention shifted toward me and the interrogation began. I retold the story of how I got to be here. They were friendly but insistent, and if I didn't answer something to their satisfaction, they probed for further detail until I did. Some of the questions were not even related to the dying man, but were philosophical or moral questions. After 2 hours of deep interrogation, they seemed satisfied. The guild had lasted for millennia, they explained. The council, which I was sitting in front of, was the highest form of decision-making in the guild, and was comprised of its 9 oldest members. Some members had even been on the council for over 1,000 years. They then told me about the object I had in my pocket. They told me it granted almost everlasting life, and that this ankh was now mine, and I should always keep it close to my heart. There's a button on the ankh, they explained, which allows you to duplicate it once every 10 years. This is how the guild grows. The ankh is the most powerful item ever gifted to man, but its power, they warned, is alluring. To some, even all-consuming. Throughout the millennia of the guild's existence, the guild kept the ankh secret, but they also kept it under control. Many people became corrupted by the ankh. Its power corrupted thoughts, turning otherwise kind, caring people into thoughtless, selfish monsters, intent only on self-gain at the expense of everybody else. They had a name for people who were beyond saving from its influence: the Crows. They also told me about the rules. Most of them, understandably, had to do with avoiding attention. The secrecy of the guild and the power of the Ankh was the most important thing, and the lengths they would go to maintain this secrecy were violent and excessive. If I wanted to get married and have children, I had to have my wife approved beforehand. They told me I had to change my name, that I could never go back home, and that I would never see my family again. The punishment for doing so, they said, was death. I left the island rich beyond my wildest dreams, but entirely alone. For the first time in my life, I had not one friend or family member I could talk to. I emigrated to New York and spent the next 20 years learning from the guild. I learned how to invest and how to stay anonymous. I met my lifelong friends, John Wesson and Willow Green, both members of the guild themselves. Though I did miss my family, life was good and peaceful. In 1878, I met Emma. I fell in love from the moment I saw her. She was smart, beautiful, but most importantly, she made me laugh. It was 3 years before I told her about the Ankh, the guild, and how old I really was. She, of course, didn't believe me at first. But after meeting John and Willow, she came to realize I wasn't joking. She was so nervous when it came time to meet the guild. I always knew I wanted to marry her, but with the guild and the life consequences of joining, I took it slowly. She was given the task of delivering a case full of gold across the country. She was told the value of it and promised that it was entirely untraceable, and that, if she wanted, she could leave with it forever and there would be no repercussions. There was a part of me that was frightened she would. She was inducted into the guild a week later. We bought this house together. New York had tired us both out, and after being inducted into the guild, Emma was needing a new identity and location to live. Life with Emma was perfect. She continued to make me laugh, and every day I was excited to discover something more about her. I felt like the luckiest man in the world, knowing that this dream I was living would last for hundreds, possibly even thousands of years. You probably wouldn't believe it, but this house was new once. The estate you see around you now, with its modern brick buildings, noisy children and cars on every driveway, was once our humble farm. When she told me she was pregnant, I was so excited to raise a child with her. We talked endlessly about what the child would be when they grew up, how they would put an end to war and poverty, how they would raise their own family and we would have a town full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren to watch over. She died during childbirth in 1895. Both the children survived. We were going to name them George and Joseph, but Emma liked Charles better than Joseph, so I named them George and Charles. It was hard, raising two children on my own. Losing Emma took the excitement out of it. I found myself resenting them, even blaming them for what had happened to her. I hated them, but I hated myself more for feeling this way. It's not what Emma would have wanted. I neglected them and buried myself in work as a way of distracting myself from losing her. I think this is why they turned out the way they did. It was around this time John and I started the investment firm Moore & Wesson. We provided loans to up-and-coming entrepreneurs and were making money at a rate beyond anything I'd ever imagined. At the outbreak of the First World War, John and I decided to enlist. The things that were happening across Europe, how could we do anything but join? The twins were old enough to live without me, so I sold my shares of the company, left them both with a small supply of money and gold, and hoped to never see them again. John had mastered the art of forging documents and created fresh identities to use after the war. The horrors of war quickly came back, but this was completely unlike the Crimean War. We spent months in trenches unable to advance. Constant bullets and explosions rained overhead. Your ears would constantly ring from the blasts, and an uninterrupted night's sleep was unheard of. Many of the young men I shipped with died horrible deaths. I don't know why I, who by this point had lived a full life, and who at times wanted to die, survived. But life is strange like that. When the war was nearing its end, John and I faked our deaths and returned to America. I moved to Chicago and John moved to California. I was going by Joseph at this time. It seemed like a nice way to honor Emma. Wesson had become a national bank by this point. There are branches in most cities across the country, and would you believe it, there right at the front, above the counter in every branch, was a picture of John and I. People often commented that I looked just like William Moore, and I'd always reply that he's old enough to be my father. I was reading a newspaper sometime in the early 1920s when I saw George and Charles there on the page looking back at me. I still remember the headline of the article. War heroes and sons of William Moore start their own bank. Their bank continued to grow throughout the 1920s, becoming one of the top banks in New York. Their names became household names, and I wouldn't even hazard a guess at the money they were making. But there was something else I noticed when I saw them in the paper. Something worrying. They looked exactly the same as the day I left them. Young men approaching their 20s, not adults aged by life and war. I knew instantly they had used the Ankh. I wrote to John asking if he knew about this, and he agreed to look into it for me. The guild had a way of knowing when an Ankh was duplicated, and it turned out that my Ankh had been duplicated in 1913. The guild made contact with them the same year, and they were inducted before the war started. I knew I had a responsibility to reach out to them. I was nervous, afraid they would hate me after running away. But knowing they had joined the guild meant they would at least understand. John and I flew to New York in February of 1929. We made an appointment to meet them at their huge office in Manhattan. The conversation was tense. They were upset that I kept the guild from them, that I ran away to maintain the secret. And even though I tried to explain the burden of being in the guild and the real cost of the Ankh, they said it should have been up to them to decide if the cost was too high. That stripping them of that choice was selfish. Perhaps they were right, but I knew since they were young children that the power of the Ankh would corrupt them. They were the sort of people the Ankh feeds on. We spent the rest of the day eating and drinking. The best chefs in New York catered to our every need. We drank wines and champagnes that cost more than most people earned in a year, even a lifetime. George and Charles had chosen a life of opulence. They wore it well, as if they had always been part of the elite. I asked how they knew about the Ankh. It turned out I hadn't been as good at keeping secrets as I thought. They discovered some of the correspondence I had over the years, and, of course, weren't entirely blind to the fact I hadn't aged. They found the Ankh one day while I was asleep and duplicated it. I should have done more to keep it secret, but how do you keep a secret like that from your own family? had joined the guild together, and the guild gave them a second ankh so they wouldn't have to wait 5 years to both be under its sway. I don't know how they passed the test. They must have lied through their teeth. After conversation moved on from the guild, they told us about their business, how the loans they were creating were basically worthless. They were making money at the expense of the people using their services. They told us that something big was coming. John and I already knew that the guild were extremely powerful. But it wasn't until this conversation I realized just how powerful and pervasive they were. All of the top bankers in the country were guild members, and a great many of them had already been corrupted by the Yank. The market, they said, was overvalued and a crash was inevitable, but unpredictable. So they were taking measures into their own hands and were going to crash the market in September. The sell-off had already started at a small scale, but by September the sell-off would be massive. The moguls had already started shorting their stocks, and while the rest of the country would plummet into an economic depression, wealthy guild members stood to make unprecedented amounts of money. The sell-off would present a unique opportunity to buy stocks in almost any industry at the lowest price they had been in decades. With the widespread adoption of cars, the ever-increasing demand for flight, and the film industry entering a period of boom, there were so many industries to take advantage of, and so much money to make. John and I were shocked. We implored them to reconsider and warned them of the effect that would have on ordinary people, but they wouldn't listen. We spent weeks devising ways to stop the ploy. Countless hours spent arguing with the guild, begging them to do something. We weren't surprised to find out that it was the crows behind the plan. Nor were we surprised to find out the twins had joined the faction. We were, however, surprised to find out just how powerless the guild was to stop them. Realizing the crash was inevitable, John and I did all we could to mitigate the impact. The loan company we had started some 15 years earlier was now a national success with a huge number of employees. The owners were still the same ones we sold to back in 1917. I sent a package to them telling them the stock market will collapse imminently, that there was nothing they could do to stop it, but that they could limit the impact on the company by selling their investments and leaving the stock market. A few days later, I saw an article that Wesson & Moore had sold some of their ventures. They called it a restructuring. And when the Wall Street crash came in September, Wesson & Moore managed to remain open, keeping the majority of its employees in work across the country. It was a small victory, but at least we felt like we did something. During the height of the crash, the twins faked their death by jumping out of their office window. Suicide was commonplace for Wall Street investors in the period. A part of me wishes they really did jump. After what they did to the country and the rest of the world, they really deserve to carry on living. And not only living, but living a life of luxury, with more money than most people could even dream of having. I donated as much money as I could afford. Working within the guild, we set up soup kitchens across the country. Bread lines formed, sometimes for miles. They helped, and thanks to their work, many people who would have otherwise died from starvation survived. But it was still not enough. The global economic and political situation was dire, and most people knew that a war was coming. I spent the 30s traveling the world. Flying by airplane was magical and opened up so much of the world to me. When I joined the Crimean War all those years ago, I never thought I'd make it past 25. And yet in 1935 I celebrated my 100th birthday. The global economic and political situation was dire, and most people knew that a war was coming. I spent the 30s traveling the world. Flying by airplane was magical and opened up so much of the world to me. When I joined the Crimean War all those years ago, I never thought I'd make it past 25. And yet in 1935 I celebrated my 100th birthday. In 1936, I travelled to Germany for the Olympics. The event was grand. The Germans had built stadiums on a scale I'd never seen before. The event was televised across the world, and it looked immaculate. Despite how it looked, it felt completely different. The swastika hadn't yet become the symbol of hate we recognize it as today, but a rampant nationalism could be felt in the air. The German papers condemned attendance and the participation of black people and Jews. A hatred in the air when Jesse Owens, a black American track runner, won his gold medal was palpable. I felt afraid for him in those moments, and knew the tension I felt would erupt into something much bigger. And in 1939, it did. When Pearl Harbor was bombed and America was forced into the war, I sold my house and contacted John, letting him know of my intentions. It was the third war I had fought in, and seeing how much war had changed since Crimea terrified me. Young lads were being butchered. As war was no longer isolated to just the battlefield. It was felt at home. The news told me of the decimation in London and Coventry. My home country, which I always loved, was being destroyed. After the war was over, John and I moved to Seattle. I developed what we now call PTSD, but back then we called it shell shock. I couldn't sleep at night, and my days were filled with flashbacks. If I heard a loud noise in the street, like a car backfiring, I would duck for cover and the war came flooding back. I drank a lot. It helped me forget, and sometimes I would even pass out and get some sleep. John helped me a lot too. He was always there to talk to me. He understood, even if he wasn't dealing with the same issues himself. Living forever became lonely, and I needed to share life with somebody else. So in 1952, I married Margaret. Margaret brought back a joy in my life I had not felt since I lost Emma. She was funny, kind, and ambitious. She lived every day like it was her last and wanted to leave nothing undone. She passed the guild's test without issue, and we were looking forward to spending a long life together. In 1952, I really felt like life was worth living again. I moved back to New York, into the house I had purchased so long ago. It felt like home, familiar in an unfamiliar time. I really appreciated what I had in those years, and I also appreciated all that I had seen, and what had changed in my long life. Technology had come so far. There was still the part of me that grew up with oil lanterns that thought of it all as magic. We had 2 children, your aunt, Rose, and your father, Frederick. I loved both of them so much. I felt a connection with them I had never felt with the twins. Life was blessed until Margaret started to change. She started drinking more. She became detached and depressed. Medication didn't help. If anything, it made it worse. Made her numb to the good times, but still she absorbed all the bad. I knew it wasn't her. The Ankh was corrupting her. I did all I could. Spoke to everybody I could in the guild to find a way to fix her, to bring her back to herself. But nothing worked. The guild took her away one evening. I fought against it, battling old friends as they came through the door. But they overpowered me. I never saw her again. Explaining to the children what had happened to their mother was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. I couldn't tell them the truth, but what could I say? I told them she died. John and Willow helped fake her death and organized a funeral. I made my decision shortly after that. I couldn't let my children use the Ankh. It had destroyed Margaret, a woman full of life. It had ruined my relationship with my first 2 children. and it had caused immeasurable amounts of damage to the world. I made the difficult choice to not let them know about the guild. Knowing they would grow up and one day die before I even appeared to age was hard and filled me with guilt. But I had no other option. In the 1970s, I started to feel hatred and sadness. It wasn't the same as I felt after the war, but instead deeper. Less visible, but I struggled to find any meaning in life. Over the next 30 years, it just got worse and worse. In the 1990s, my grandchildren were born. I should have had many grandchildren by now, but these were the first that I was aware of. When I saw you and your brother, I felt such love and adoration, but I couldn't feel happy. It was a strange feeling, seeing these new faces that I loved more than anything, but still having the pit in my chest grow. I feigned many smiles, but could never force a real one. I tried everything. Doctors, medication, even therapy. None of it worked. Eventually, sometime in late 2010, I decided that it was time to let go. It felt like I was completely shut off from humanity. I have lived a good, long life. I've seen the world, seen mankind at its best and at its worst. And I've seen technology advance beyond what even the most ambitious thinkers dreamed it would ever be.